Now we're going to have a look at triggers. So what is a trigger? Well, it might be when you reach the end of a level and you want the player to touch something which signifies that this is the end of the level. So that will then trigger an action to end the level and go to the post screen as a victory. Triggers can also be used for things like gems. So when you collect a gem, you want it to add a number to your gem count. So all of that can be done with triggers. So now you can either create a new class called trigger or drag one in. Trigger is going to be a subclass of entity in its configure collision body. It's not going to be affected by gravity. Its category bitmask will be trigger. Its collision bitmask will be none. And its contact bitmask will be player. Because all of our triggers will be triggered when the player reaches that position. In the collided with function, we are accessing the game scene and telling it to run a function called trigger with command. And the command will be the name of the entity. Whenever we set up this trigger to do something, we have to make sure we set its entity description to be the name that corresponds with the type of trigger activity it's doing. So in a build sprite, I'm just going to set the entity description to a default of finish level. Now we're also going to use this for gems, so I'm just going to put a function in here called gem texture, and what this will do is it will assign a texture of a gem to this sprite node. Okay, so back in our game scene, let's come down to the bottom now under events and add a new function called trigger with command, and the command that's passed in will be a string. So on the command we're just going to do a switch statement with two cases. So it's either going to be finish dash level or add gem. So if it's finish level, we're going to create a post screen with the same size as this scene. The level will be equal to the current level, and because we're finishing the level with a trigger, we know that it was a victory, so we can say post.win equal to true, and then the gems will be the number of gems collected. Scale mode will be equal to the scale mode of this scene, and we'll just add a transition with that is going to be a fade with duration, and then tell the view to present the scene. In the add gem, we're just going to tell to increment the gems collected by 1. And since we're adding a way for the game to end in victory, let's also add the way that the game is going to end in failure. So I'm adding a function down here called player died. So it's going to be exactly the same in how it transitions to the post screen, except the win will quite obviously be false. Okay, so if we have a look back on our list of codes, you'll see here that N is for gem and X is for endpoint. So what we'll do now is handle both of those in the world layer. So I've copied in here case N, so it's going to create a tile of sknode as usual, but it's also going to create a trigger, and that trigger's entity description will be add gem. The size of the trigger will be the same size as the tile. We're going to tell it to run that gem texture. If you remember back in the trigger class, it had gem texture so that it could set a texture for the gem. Z position 65, so we want it to be towards the front. And then we'll add it to our tile. And then finally, let's add case X. There'll also be a tile of sknode with a new trigger created with entity description of finish level and then added to the tile. So if we have a look back at one of our levels, you can see at the end of it here where there's this big string of X's up and down, this signifies the end of the level. So when the player reaches here, it's victory. And in amongst these other letters, it's probably a little hard to see, but there are a few N's. And these are going to be those gems. So now that we have all the transitions set up for our post screen, we better create it. So let's add a new class, 5_post_screen. So there'll be class post screen and there'll be a subclass of sg scene. And now we'll add those variables that we were setting before when the level was finished. So that'll be the level, which is a string, whether it was a win or not, which is a boolean, and the number of gems. In my did move to view, I'm going to have two functions which run, so one that lays out the scene and another that saves those stats. And then when the player touches anywhere on the screen, I just want it to take me back to the main menu. So they know that the level's finished, they just want to head back to the main menu so they can just tap anywhere on the screen. Now back in our game scene, we just need to add this gems collected. So under stats, VAR, gems collected, and they'll be equal to 0. So we're just initializing that with a value of 0. Okay, so if you build and run the application now, you should see your gems, and when you impact with them, you collect the gem. Now when you get to the end of the scene, it now transitions to that scene, and we haven't put anything in there yet, so you just get a blank screen. And when you click anywhere on it, you go back to the main menu. Okay, so that's working as intended. Now, if it is a victory, we want the game to save those stats. So we want it to save the number of gems, assuming that the number of gems is higher than the previous number of gems. And we also want to save that that level is being completed. A nice easy way to save these simple stats is using NSUserDefaults. NSUserDefaults is not the most secure way to store these stats in the world, but it's good enough for this. So if it's a win, we're going to use NSUserDefaults, standard user defaults, and we're going to set the bool to true for the name of the level. So each level that is completed will have a boolean value of true for the name of that level. And this should be a pretty easy way to manage which levels are complete and which are not. Okay, then if gems is greater than the current number of gems, so integer for key, then that's going to be the name of the level with the word gems suffixed on the end. So if the current gems is higher than the gems that had previously been saved, then we want to do something. And the previous value could even be null, and this will work okay. So we're going to set then through NSUserDefaults, we're going to set integer, the number of gems, for key, the name of the level with gem suffixed on it. And then we're just going to synchronize those NSUserDefaults so that it is properly saved. If you're having trouble working out NSUserDefaults, think of it like your P list, where you have keys and values, as it works in exactly the same way. Now I'm just going to add in some detail for the background and some text to say whether you passed or failed. And at the moment we don't actually have a way that the player can fail. So if you come back into your game scene and into the update method, underneath your player ninja update, just add this if position x, so the x position of your character, is less than the layer position x times -1 plus 60. Now this figure I just came to because that's right on the edge of the screen, so if your player gets pushed back that far, then the game will fail. And there's another condition in here, if the y position is less than -30. So that's if the character has fallen down a hole or something and they're about to go off screen. We're going to change the game state to game def and call player died. Okay, so now all that is set up. You now have the post screen, you have the conditions for winning and failing, it saves those stats, you can now collect gems, and that's all working with triggers. Now it's time to finish the menu flow so you can have a character select screen and a level select screen.